The air in the cavernous ballroom was so thick with money and silence, I could barely breathe. Every footstep on the polished marble sounded like a gunshot. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not even close. I'd been running all day, chasing a rumor of a last-minute catering job, my worn-out phone buzzing with a vague address, the Blackwood estate, West Wing entrance. I mistook the heavy, oak-paneled door marked service for the correct entrance to a high-end interview. Instead, I had stumbled into a waking nightmare, a wedding so extravagant it screamed billionaire status, a wedding I was definitely not invited to. I froze just inside the shadows of the doorway, clutching my stained, empty canvas bag like a shield. My cheap, second-hand dress suddenly felt like a bright, flashing target in a room full of designer silk and tailored suits. But it wasn't the opulence that stole my breath, it was him. He was standing at the altar, or whatever they called the massive, flower-choked stage. His back was to me, but I knew that impossibly broad line of his shoulders, the way his dark, tailored suit fit him with a lethal, second-skin precision. Kain Blackwood. The name was a shiver of ice on my skin, a memory I had tried to bury with years of cheap rent and exhaustion. He was the high-stakes figure now, the Mafia Boss, the CEO, the billionaire, but to me, for a painful, blinding second, he was just the boy whose hand I'd held under a different, kinder sky. The boy I'd been forced to leave behind, taking his heart and a secret with me. The woman beside him, Audrey Thorne, was stunning, a masterpiece of cold, perfect beauty. She was smiling, but her eyes held the glint of possession, not love. They were holding hands, and a fresh wave of sick grief hit me. He was moving on. He had everything. And I was still the waitress, running from shadows and scraping by. I needed to disappear. Now. Before he turned around. Before the past, which I had fought so hard to escape, reached out and snatched me back. I started to melt back into the shadows, inch by slow, agonizing inch. Just a few more seconds and I'd be out, back on the street, back to my lonely, anonymous life. That's when the music swelled, the officiant cleared his throat, and Kain Blackwood turned. It was like every sound in the world cut out. His eyes, the color of a winter storm, swept over the crowd, dismissing them all with that same cold arrogance I remembered, that same dangerous intensity. But as they landed on the dark corner where I was hiding, they stopped. And they didn't just stop. They snapped. It wasn't recognition at first, not the kind that brings joy or even anger. It was a predator's halt, a sudden, sharp interest in a vulnerability he hadn't expected. He stared, his head tilted, his expression going from stone to something I couldn't read, a mix of confusion and lethal curiosity. My heart was beating so hard it hurt my ribs. He doesn't know. He can't. I lifted my hand, ready to press it to my mouth to stop a sob, a plea, anything from escaping. It was a nervous reflex, an instinct, but it was the worst mistake I could have made. The light caught my inner wrist, the skin pale and exposed. And there it was, the simple, hand-drawn interlocking infinity symbol, faded and small, but unmistakable. We had drawn them on each other with a cheap needle and India ink on a reckless, late summer night years ago, a childhood pact, a secret symbol of our forever. A mark that meant everything to us and nothing to the world. Kain's perfect stillness shattered. The smile fell from Audrey Thorne's lips. The officiant trailed off. The massive ballroom went from silent to utterly, sickeningly silent. Kain's gaze locked onto my wrist, tracing the faded ink as if it were carved into his own skin. His breath hitched, a small, ragged sound that the microphone picked up and amplified through the speakers. He took one step down from the stage, then another, his tailored shoe scuffing against the pristine marble. His eyes lifted from the mark, finding mine across the vast, terrifying distance. The confusion was gone, replaced by a blazing, terrible mixture of rage and agonizing, raw recognition. "Clara," he whispered, his voice a rough, guttural sound of pure agony and ownership. It wasn't a greeting, it was a devastating claim. He stopped at the edge of a stage, his gaze still holding mine. His jaw was clenched, so tight, I could see the muscles jump. His bride-to-be, the beautiful Audrey, finally moved, a delicate hand reaching for his arm. "Kain, what are you doing?" she hissed, but he didn't even register her presence. He looked at the officiant, then at the stunned crowd, then back at me, my wrists still exposed. The power radiating off him was tangible, a physical force that made the air vibrate. He was the most dangerous man in the room, and he was staring only at me. Then, with a voice that was suddenly, terrifyingly calm, a voice that cut through the silence like a steel wire, he spoke. Not to his bride, not to the guests, to the two enormous, silent bodyguards standing sentinel by the door. "Get her," he commanded, his eyes never leaving mine. His voice was final, irrevocable. He looked back at the crowd, his face a mask of cold, brutal certainty. "This wedding is cancelled." And then, his gaze returned to me, blazing with something that was equal parts hatred and raw, desperate desire. The sound of the bodyguards moving toward me was the sound of my past finally catching up. He stepped down from the stage completely, starting his slow, predatory walk toward me. "I waited for you for 7 years, Clara," he snarled, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 broken promises. "You made your choice then. Now I'll make mine." Before we go on with the story, tell me, where are you watching from, and what's the weather like there today? Please remember to like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of this explosive story. The hands that grabbed me were strong, impersonal, and unavoidable. They didn't hurt me, that would be sloppy, but the grip was a promise of containment. I didn't struggle. What was the point? When Kain Blackwood said, "Get her," it wasn't a request. It was the final period on a sentence I thought I had escaped. The wedding guests were a sea of stunned, silent faces, but they parted for Kain and his guards like the Red Sea. No one dared to interfere. They knew who he was, or at least, they knew the power that hung around him like a dark, expensive cologne. I was pulled backward, away from the light of the main hall and into a maze of back corridors. I caught one last glimpse of Audrey Thorne, her perfect face twisted into a snarl of cold, burning fury. She wasn't looking at me, the victim. She was looking at Kain, the prize she'd just lost. I was shoved into a small, windowless room, a luxurious holding cell, maybe a security office. It was decorated in the same oppressive, tasteful dark woods and leather as the rest of the estate. The doors clicked shut. It was just me and the two guards, massive men named something I didn't catch, their faces unreadable, their postures like stone. I finally allowed myself to breathe, a shaky, inadequate gasp. "Please," I whispered, my voice raw. I just made a mistake. I thought I had an interview here. I didn't mean to interrupt." One of the guards, the slightly shorter one, didn't even twitch. "Mr. Blackwood will be with you shortly, ma'am. Please remain seated." Seated. As if I were a guest waiting for tea, not a prisoner waiting for my past to exact its terrible revenge. I paced the small room, my heart still hammering against my ribs. I had to think. What did he want? Money? Revenge for leaving? He was a billionaire. He didn't need my 2 cents or my apologies. He was a mafia boss. He dealt in blood and territory, not feelings. But the look in his eyes, that terrifying, agonizing blend of fury and sorrow when he saw the tattoo, that was pure, unprocessed emotion. That was the boy I knew, buried deep beneath the ice of the man he'd become. A sharp rap on the door broke my frantic thoughts. The guard straightened. Eli Blackwood walked in first. Kain's cousin and right-hand man. I remembered him, a skinny, cheerful kid who always had a kind word. Now, he was taller, broader, with the same sharp eyes as Kain, but softer lines around his mouth. He looked at me with a complicated expression, pity, maybe, and regret. "Clara," he said, his voice quiet. He used my name like he was testing its flavor after a long time. "Eli," I responded, a thread of hope momentarily strengthening my voice. "Please, tell him I just want to leave. I won't tell anyone what I saw. I won't cause trouble. I need to get back to the city." Eli sighed, running a hand over his face. "You walked into Kain's life on his wedding day, Clara. On his territory. Trouble is the only thing you caused. And trust me, getting out isn't an option right now. Before I could press him, the door opened again, and Kain entered. He didn't stride in. He materialized, filling the room with a sudden, suffocating presence. The air pressure seemed to drop. The guards shifted uneasily. Eli stepped back, making himself small. Kain looked different now. The tuxedo jacket was gone, the tie loosened, his collar slightly open. It didn't make him look less dangerous. It made him look like a caged animal ready to strike. The vulnerability from the altar was completely gone, replaced by a mask of cold, controlled dominance. He didn't speak. He just walked slowly toward me, his eyes dark and unwavering. It was a calculated, deliberate approach, designed to intimidate and terrify. It worked. I stumbled back until my spine hit the cold wood of the wall. He stopped a foot in front of me. I had to crane my neck to look up at him. The man I knew had been tall. This man felt like a mountain. "You're thinner," he stated, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that was somehow more threatening than a shout. It wasn't a question or a comment. It was a devastating observation, a recognition of my years of struggle. I swallowed hard, trying to reclaim some shred of my dignity. "Kain, let me go. This is insane. You canceled your wedding for what? A mistake? You don't even know me anymore." A cold, mirthless smile touched the corner of his lips. "Oh, but I do, Clara Hayes." He reached out, his long, powerful fingers closing around my wrist, right above the faint, damning tattoo. His touch was an electric shock, a horrifying mix of pain and agonizing familiarity. "I know this mark. I know the promise it represents. And I know the lie you built your life on when you shattered that promise." He squeezed, just enough to be painful. I gasped, not just from the pressure, but from the raw, unleashed feeling in his touch. 7 years, he ground out, leaning in until I could smell the faint, expensive scent of his cologne and the dangerous edge of his fury. 7 years and you didn't call, didn't write, didn't look back. You just disappeared. And I was left to pick up the pieces of my life, thinking you were dead, or worse, that you just decided I wasn't good enough. It wasn't like that. The denial burst out of me, desperate and useless. I had to leave. I was trying to protect you. He laughed then, a harsh, terrible sound devoid of humor. "Protect me? I am Kain Blackwood. I don't need protection, especially not from a waitress running away from her life. You chose freedom over me. You chose silence over the truth. You chose to let me believe you were gone forever." He released my wrist, the sudden lack of contact feeling almost worse than the grip. He stepped back, the cold mask snapping back into place. He looked at Eli. "Eli, secure her. She stays on the estate. No communication out. No one, absolutely no one, is to know she is here. She is a matter of mine." His use of the word mine was like a heavy chain snapping around my heart. "And get Dr. Avery here. Now." Eli looked hesitant. "Kain, Dr. Avery? Is that necessary?" Kain's eyes flashed, dangerous and absolute. "The mark, Eli. Don't play stupid. I need to know if she still possesses what she was running from. I need to know if she's safe to be around. And I need to know if she can still feel the bond. The bond. The truth behind the tattoo. The reason I had run. My blood ran cold. The paranormal element I had tried so hard to forget was suddenly staring me down. The unique nature of our connection wasn't just sentimental, it was supernatural. A tether that meant if he hurt, I felt it. If I was in danger, he knew. And I had broken that connection, or thought I had, to save his life. He looked back at me, his face utterly devoid of mercy. "You walked into my wedding, Clara. You made your accident/error," he said, his voice lowering to a chilling promise. "You just triggered the shocking consequence. You are no longer running. You are mine now. And you don't leave until you tell me the truth. The whole truth. Even the parts that hurt us both." He turned and walked toward the door. Just before he left, he paused, looking over his shoulder. "Welcome back to hell, sweetheart." The door closed, leaving me alone with the two silent guards and the terrifying realization that I was trapped in the cage of the most powerful and heartbroken man I had ever known. A man whose feelings for me were a weapon and whose organization was a prison. My escape plan had just crashed and burned, and the real danger, the supernatural bond one had tried to sever, was now the focus of the Mafia Boss CEO. The silence that followed Kain's exit was heavier than his presence, ringing with the echo of his last words. "You are mine now." I pushed myself off the wall, my legs shaking. The guards hadn't moved. They were furniture now, lethal and permanent.
Mine.
The word was a heavy, suffocating blanket, stripping away the 7 years I had spent painstakingly building a life of anonymity and freedom. He didn't claim me out of simple revenge. He claimed me as a right, a property based on a forgotten, painful pact. The bond. The possession. The true reason for my flight was buried in the past, in the woods behind our childhood homes, where we discovered that our connection was more than just young love. We weren't just soulmates. We were tethered. Every intense emotion, joy, fear, and especially pain, registered like an electric current between us. And the possession Kain spoke of wasn't demonic. It was the rare, latent ability I possessed, one that made me a prime target for the people Kain now fought against. I had been told my existence put him in unimaginable danger, that my power, which I barely understood, would lead the others directly to his family's ancient organization. A desperate, foolish thought surfaced. Maybe the years, the distance, maybe they severed it. "Do you really need Dr. Avery?" I asked the closest guard, a man whose face was carved from granite. He didn't look at me. "Mr. Blackwood's commands are not open for discussion, ma'am." A few agonizing minutes later, the door hissed open again. It was Eli Blackwood. He waved the two guards out with a subtle, authoritative gesture. They hesitated only for a moment before obeying, which told me everything about Eli's standing in this dark empire. "He's not a monster, Clara," Eli said, his voice low and apologetic as the door clicked shut, giving us a brief, temporary moment of privacy. "He's just broken. You left him at the worst possible time, in the middle of a brutal power struggle. He spent years believing you abandoned him for your own safety, that you dismissed the truth of your bond. I was told if I stayed, he would be killed," I whispered, the old pain flooding my throat. I was an opening, a vulnerability the others would exploit. My father, he was terrified. He made me swear I would never look back. It was the only way to protect him before he took his own life. The last part was still a fresh, raw wound, a sacrifice I carried every day. Eli's expression softened into genuine sorrow. "Kain doesn't know that. All he knows is that you vanished, and he had to become this mafia boss to protect the space you left behind. He built an empire to keep the others out of his life, only for you to walk back into it on the one day he was trying to replace you." "He didn't replace me," I argued weakly. "He was moving on. He had a fiancée. He was marrying Audrey Thorne for a business alliance and a political shield, not for love," Eli corrected, his tone grim. "That was clear to everyone. When he saw that tattoo on your wrist, it was like someone poured acid over his carefully constructed ice castle. He didn't cancel the wedding. He burned his entire life plan down, just for the chance to look at you again." The intensity of that gesture, canceling a billionaire wedding and a major business alliance on the spot, hit me then. It wasn't just rage. It was a devastating, desperate move of a man who couldn't bear the lie of his future when his past was standing right in front of him. "Dr. Avery is here," Eli warned, standing straighter. "Don't fight it, Clara. Let her do what she needs to do. She's checking for residual energy, the signs of the tether." "What if she finds it?" I asked, my voice barely a tremor. Eli's gaze was grave. "Then you become his highest priority, and his greatest weakness." The door opened, and a woman stepped in. Dr. Avery. She was small, impeccably dressed, and wore thin, gold-rimmed glasses. She looked more like a museum curator than a scientist of the paranormal. But her eyes, sharp, intelligent and unsettlingly clinical, held a knowing glance that confirmed she belonged in this world of secrets. "Miss Hayes," she greeted, her voice calm and professional. "I'm Dr. Avery. Mr. Blackwood needs a simple, non-invasive scan to determine the status of your bioenergetic signature. For his peace of mind, and frankly, for yours. Come with me." The examination room was one floor below, hidden behind a disguised bookshelf. It was surprisingly modern, all steel, wires and soft, humming light. In the center was a chair that looked more like a low throne, wrapped in smooth, black leather and connected to a series of glowing monitors. "Just sit down, Ms. Hayes. This won't take long," Dr. Avery instructed, her movements precise. As I sat, my mind raced. The bond was tied to my latent abilities, the energy I had spent years repressing. I tried to focus on the cold reality of the chair beneath me, on the need to appear calm, to show them I was harmless, normal. Dr. Avery placed two thin metal bands around my wrists, one over the tattoo, the other on the opposite arm. A faint, cool tingling sensation spread through my limbs. The monitors began to flicker with complex, indecipherable graphs. "I am checking the residual field, the sympathetic link," Dr. Avery murmured, tapping a few keys. 7 years of separation, especially with your attempt to actively suppress it, should have faded the immediate connection. The goal is to see if the tether is permanently severed or merely dormant. I watched the screens, hoping for the flat line of dormant. But as Dr. Avery adjusted a dial, one specific line on the main screen, a thin, silver waveform, began to pulse with erratic, jagged energy. "Interesting," Dr. Avery noted, her voice devoid of emotion. "The central sympathetic channel is not severed. It's been clamped, actively constrained, but fully intact. That takes an extraordinary will, Ms. Hayes. You were quite serious about protecting him, weren't you?" My breath hitched. It was worse than dormant. It was waiting. The years of effort, the pain of repression, all of it had only put the bond on pause. "Now for the second reading," she said, her focus shifting to a different screen. The possession. The latent heritage signature. She changed the frequency of the sensors. This time, the feeling was different, a cold, deep ache in my core, an intrusive poke at the thing I kept locked away. I squeezed my eyes shut, focusing every ounce of my will on nothingness. Suddenly, the steel chair beneath me vibrated. One of the monitors sputtered and went dark. The silver waveform on the main screen didn't just pulse, it spiked, a violent peak that nearly slammed into the top of the graph. "Whoa!" Dr. Avery exclaimed, a rare flash of genuine surprise crossing her face. She immediately cut the power. The room went quiet again. I was shaking, the deep ache in my core settling into a dull, familiar throb. "Ms. Hayes," Dr. Avery said, her professional mask back in place, but her eyes were shining with a dangerous, professional excitement. "Your central channel is clamped, but your latent signature is not only active, it's reacting with extreme hostility to external energy. That signature is powerful. It confirms the ancient texts. It also confirms why you were a threat to him 7 years ago. The truth was out. The tether wasn't broken. The power wasn't gone. I was exactly the same threat I had always been, but now I was trapped within the compound of the one man I was meant to protect him from." The door burst open. Kain was standing there. He hadn't been able to wait. His eyes went from the flickering monitor to my pale face. "The verdict, doctor?" he demanded, his voice a low thunder. Dr. Avery cleared her throat, adjusting her glasses. "The bond is active, Mr. Blackwood. Dormant, but fully recoverable. And her energy signature is stronger than predicted. She wasn't running from you, sir. She was running from what she carries. She is still a lighthouse to the others." Kain walked into the room, his eyes fixed on me, no longer just rage, but a chilling realization of the risk he had just brought into his fortress. "Move her," he commanded, his voice raw with a sudden, devastating possessiveness. "Move her to the West Tower suite. Maximum security. No contact. No windows. Not even a glimmer of the outside world. Until I decide what to do with a woman who has the power to destroy my organization and the audacity to keep my heart. He walked right up to me, pulling me out of the chair by my elbow. The rough tenderness of his grip was a terrifying contradiction. You wanted to protect me, Clara? You think you know how to survive, he spat, his face inches from mine.
Fine.
You are now the single most guarded item in the Blackwood family vault. Let's see how long the others take to find you in my deepest, darkest tower. He didn't wait for a response, dragging me out of the sterile lab and toward the labyrinthine bowels of the estate. My new cage. My new, luxurious, but absolute prison. The West Tower suite wasn't a room. It was an entire wing. It was opulent, vast, and silent, a testament to Kain Blackwood's wealth and his need for absolute control. The walls were lined with silk, the furniture was antique, and the windows, the large, beautiful windows, were covered by thick, soundproofed curtains that could not be parted. Not by me, at least. I was escorted up 3 flights of stairs, past doors that were solid steel disguised as elegant mahogany, and into a space that felt like both a 5-star hotel and a maximum security cell. The 2 guards who had brought me here, now supplemented by 2 others stationed outside the main door, vanished. I was left alone in my gilded prison. The realization that I couldn't see the sun, the sky, or anything beyond these thick walls hit me with a physical force. It wasn't just about escape. It was about the psychological pressure of total isolation. 7 years of running had been exhausting, terrifying, and lonely, but at least I had the horizon. Now, I had only the suffocating, expensive darkness. I paced the length of the living area, my hands running over the perfect, cold surfaces. He doesn't want me to leave. He doesn't want anyone to find me. The paradox of the situation was a cruel joke. I was the danger, but he was the protector, locking me away from the world, and from him, in the most extravagant way possible. I tried to focus on the immediate future. I needed to eat, to sleep, to regain some of the energy that Dr. Avery's invasive scan had drained from me. I found the master bedroom, a breathtaking space with a king-sized bed that looked like a cloud, and the adjoining bath, complete with a massive, sunken tub. Everything here screamed comfort, but I knew the truth. Comfort was just another chain. I was sorting through a dresser, finding new clothes, soft cottons, and silks provided by some unseen staff, when the faint, almost imperceptible sound of a lock turning made me freeze. It wasn't the main door. It was an inner door, disguised as part of the wall paneling near the fireplace. Kain Blackwood walked in. He wasn't dressed in the crumpled formality of the cancelled wedding, nor the dangerous, loosened collar of the security room. He was wearing black sweatpants and a simple, dark t-shirt that hugged his powerful build. He looked less like the CEO mafia boss and more like the boy who used to sneak into my bedroom window, except this boy was covered in hardened muscle and radiating a cold, impenetrable aura. He held a bottle of whiskey and a single glass. He looked exhausted, the lines around his eyes deeper, the shadow of his beard darker. He hadn't slept, I realized. He had spent the night burning his life down. He walked past me without a word and settled onto the sofa, pouring a generous measure of the dark liquor.
He didn't offer me any.
He didn't even look at me. This is ridiculous, Kain, I said, unable to bear the silence anymore. I hated the tremor in my voice. He took a slow, deliberate sip of the whiskey, his eyes fixed on the distant, uncurtained wall. What is? My life? Yes, I agree. My imprisonment, I clarified, walking toward the sofa, keeping a safe distance. I am not a weapon or an object. I made a choice 7 years ago to protect you. Locking me up doesn't change the threat. It just makes me a target in your own home. He finally looked at me, and the ice in his eyes was instant, painful. It changes everything, Clara. You made a choice without consulting the other half of the bond. You decided my fate for me. You left me bleeding out emotionally while I had to fight to keep a secret society from carving up my family's legacy. He set the glass down with a sharp clink. And now you're back. That means you are my problem, my responsibility, and my risk. My rules. And rule number 1 is, You don't leave this suite without me. And rule number 2? I challenged, my own fear fueling my anger. I become your gilded prisoner until the others find us both. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, staring into the liquid in the glass. His voice dropped to a low, raw intensity. Rule number 2 is you tell me why. Everything. Every detail about why you left, where you went, and what you suppressed to make that tattoo look like nothing more than a childish promise. You don't get to save me by lying to me anymore. I told Eli. I don't care what you told Eli, he interrupted, his tone final. I want to hear it from you. The words. The fear. The desperation. I want to know why my heart was shredded for 7 years based on a decision you made for 2 people. The sheer, raw demand for intimacy and truth was overwhelming. He wasn't asking for a summary. He was demanding the full, agonizing memory. It will hurt, I warned, thinking of my father's desperate, final confession. Kain finally looked up at me, his eyes burning. I'm already in hell, Clara. Give me the details. I walked over to the opposite side of the room, needing space to breathe. My father was, he knew. He was a low-level operative in your family's network. He recognized the signs of the tether when we got that tattoo. I touched my wrist, the place where the thin, faint lines of the infinity symbol lay hidden. He told me the others, the rival faction you're fighting, they don't just want power, they want to use certain rare, gifted people to amplify their own dark energy. He said the possession in me wasn't just latent, it was a beacon. That if I stayed close to you, the air, they would track me, capture me, and use me to cripple the Blackwood organization, maybe even kill you. My voice cracked. He made me promise that night, right before he left that note, that I would run until I was unrecognizable, until the tether was suppressed so deep I could never be found. He believed my leaving was the only way to save your life. He took his own life right after I left, to erase his connection to me, to give me a head start. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Kain didn't move. He didn't shout. He just sat there, processing the crushing weight of the sacrifice I had made, the horror of the memory I had carried. The narrative hook of my sudden reappearance had just been devastatingly explained. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up and pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. A muscle in his jaw twitched violently. He told you a convenient lie, Kain muttered, his voice muffled, thick with emotion. The tether is powerful, yes. But it's also the single greatest protection we have. When linked, we share strength. We share warnings. You running didn't protect me. It made me blind. It made me weak enough that I nearly lost everything, including myself. He lowered his hands, and his eyes were blazing with a fresh, terrible understanding, but also a deep, heart-wrenching pain. I spent 7 years turning myself into the monster I am now, thinking you chose freedom over me. You chose survival over me. But you chose to become a lonely waitress running on fumes, living on a lie of protection. You sacrificed your soul to save my life, and you didn't even get the result you wanted. He stood up, towering over me. The proximity was immediate, intimate, and terrifying. I canceled a strategic wedding, Clara. I exposed myself to every enemy and broke a massive alliance, all because a faded tattoo triggered a memory I've been trying to crush for years. You think I did that for a pretty face?
No.
I did that because the bond is still screaming. It's screaming that you are mine and you are in danger. He took another step, closing the remaining distance. His hand moved, not to my wrist this time, but to my face, his thumb gently tracing the line of my cheekbone. His touch was so soft, so achingly familiar. It shattered my resolve. Now, the truth is out, he whispered, his eyes dark with devastating sincerity.
You are still the beacon.
But now you are locked inside the vault of the man who loves you enough to burn the world to keep you safe. You are the shocking consequence of my weakness, Clara. And I will never let you leave again. He finally drank the whiskey, downing the rest of the glass in one sharp movement. He set the glass down, the sound strangely loud in the quiet room. I need to think, he said, turning abruptly toward the door he came in through. Don't try to open the curtains. Don't try to call anyone. And don't try to use that possession power. It's too unstable. It will draw them here faster than anything else. He left as quickly as he came, the hidden door sliding shut with a soft, final click. I was left trembling, not from fear of the guards, but from the terrifying, undeniable reality that the Mafia Boss CEO still loved me, and that his love, paired with my cursed existence, was the most dangerous force in the world. I had only succeeded in trading one fear for another, the fear of the others finding me for the fear of Kain never letting me go. The moment Kain left, the luxurious suite felt less like a gilded cage and more like a tomb. The air was heavy with the weight of our shared, agonizing truth. I stood in the spot where he had touched me, the faint, lingering warmth on my cheek a painful reminder of the intimacy he still demanded, even as he imprisoned me. My mind was a whirlwind of terror and fractured hope. He knew the truth. He hadn't rejected it. He had absorbed it and processed it through the ruthless lens of the Mafia Boss CEO. He believed the bond was a shield, not a danger. This was the fundamental, terrifying difference between us. I believed my possession was a curse that endangered him. He believed my presence was a missing piece of his armor. I spent the next day and a half in isolation. Meals, exquisite, untouched meals, were delivered through a silent dumbwaiter system. I tried the door, the walls, the covered windows. Nothing gave. He had truly made me the most secure, most expensive prisoner in the country. The silence was the worst part. The utter lack of outside noise, the absence of sirens, car horns, or the distant bustle of life, was maddening. It meant the curtains were not just blackout, they were soundproof. He had sealed me completely. On the second evening, just as the digital clock on the bedside table flipped to 8 p.m., the main door to the suite finally opened. It wasn't Kain. Eli Blackwood walked in, holding a slim folder. He looked tired, his handsome features strained, but his eyes still held that flicker of genuine sympathy I remembered. He waved away the security feed with a practiced gesture and closed the door behind him. "Clara," he greeted, his voice low. "You look trapped." I confirmed simply, walking out of the bedroom and into the sitting area. "And I'm guessing you're not here to slip me the key." Eli sighed, running a hand through his dark hair.
No.
"I'm here because Kain can't be. He is currently dealing with the fallout of the most expensive wedding cancellation in Blackwood history." He tossed the folder onto the mahogany coffee table. That wedding wasn't just about Audrey Thorne. Her father, Senator Thorne, was about to push through legislation that would have effectively given our organization a massive, legitimate cover for certain activities. Kain burned that bridge, publicly and brutally. The Thornes are now our enemies, and they are powerful. They don't just want revenge. They want Kain's head, and they want the full truth about why he sacrificed everything for a ghost.
My heart sank.
So, I'm not just dealing with the others and Kain's temper. I've brought a political machine down on his head. "You did, inadvertently," Eli confirmed, walking over to the window and pulling back a small, almost invisible slip in the thick curtain, just enough to reveal a sliver of the dark night and the well-manicured grounds of the estate. Kain is currently in emergency meetings, shoring up alliances, canceling deals, and preparing for a potential information war. He hasn't slept properly since he saw you. "He came to see me last night," I admitted quietly. "He told me he believes the bond is his protection." Eli turned, leaning against the window panel. "It can be, Clara. The ancient texts aren't clear, but the concept of the soul tether is one of mutual defense. Your power is unstable and a beacon, yes, but his power, the raw, inherent strength of the Blackwood bloodline, is stability. Together, you're supposed to be locked, balanced, and virtually unstoppable. Separate, you're both weak. And if he's wrong, then we are all in far deeper trouble than we know," Eli admitted grimly. "But Kain's faith in the tether is absolute. It's the only thing that kept him going for 7 years. He always believed that if you were truly gone, he would feel the severing. He never did. That's why he broke his entire life, to pull you back." He picked up the folder. "I brought you this. It's security footage and personnel files. You need to understand your situation, and you need to know who is guarding you. You need to become an active participant in your own safety, not just a passive prisoner. He opened the file, pointing to a laminated photo of a tall, imposing man with ice-blue eyes. This is Marcus. He's the head of security for the West Wing. Loyal to Kain, but he is a pragmatist. If he saw a clear, non-violent window for you to escape, and you gave him a compelling reason, he might look the other way. But the reason has to be more compelling than his paycheck. And what reason is that? Protecting Kain, Eli said simply. That's the only thing that matters in this organization. If you can convince Marcus that your freedom is the only way to genuinely save Kain, he'll help you. But you have to prove that the bond is a fatal flaw, not a benefit, and right now, Kain is betting his entire life on the opposite. He flipped to another page, showing a blurry, zoomed-in photo of a nondescript man standing near a downtown office building. This is where the Thorn revenge gets interesting. This man is Randall. He's a well-known information broker who used to work for the Thorns. He's been sniffing around your past. My past. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. He's asking questions about a waitress who suddenly disappeared and who had an unusual connection to the Blackwood family 20 years ago. He's trying to link you to the organization before the wedding, trying to prove Kain used the wedding as a cover for something else. If Randall gets any solid proof of your identity, Clara Hayes, the vulnerable/low-status protagonist, or, worse, any whiff of the possession, he will go straight to the others. Eli's eyes narrowed. That means you can't be Clara Hayes anymore. You have to be Kain Blackwood's property, permanently secured, completely untraceable. He canceled the wedding, but he hasn't yet issued the public statement that will define your relationship. That is your window. He pressed the folder into my hands. Kain is coming back tonight. He is going to demand a public solution. He can't keep a woman locked up in his house indefinitely without his rival's smelling weakness. You need to be ready with a counter-demand. You need to be the one who controls the narrative. I clutched the folder, the laminated paper feeling like a strange kind of armor. A counter-demand? What could I possibly demand from a Mafia Boss billionaire who has me locked in his tower? Eli gave me a wry, almost sad smile. He canceled his wedding and burned his best alliance for you, Clara. He thinks the bond makes you his responsibility. He's going to claim you publicly. The question is, how do you make that claim work for you? How do you make the shocking consequence the starting line of your own plan? He walked toward the main door. Think, Clara. Think like a survivor, not a victim. He needs you to complete the picture he started when he saw that tattoo.
Give him the claim.
But make it a contract. Make the prison a partnership. Eli, wait. I called out, desperate for more information, more time. He paused at the door, his hand on the steel handle. He'll be here before midnight. Be ready. And remember, your goal is not escape. Your goal is survival, and to survive, you need the world to believe you're already where you belong. He left, the heavy door locking behind him. I stared down at the file, then up at the concealed, soundproofed window. I was trapped, exposed to the wrath of the Thorns and hunted by the others. My only ally was Kain, the man whose love was a cage, and my only way out was to step further into his dangerous, dark world. I had to stop being the waitress and start thinking like the Mafia Boss's indispensable tether. My counter-demand had to be shocking, final, and perfectly tailored to solidify his power while keeping me alive. And I had only a few hours left to devise it. The hours until midnight stretched out, heavy and silent. I read the file Eli had left me, memorizing the faces of the security detail and the known movements of Randall, the information broker. Every detail confirmed my desperate position. I was a liability locked in a vault. My only path to survival, and by extension Kain's, was to change the definition of my imprisonment. I couldn't escape, and trying would only prove to Kain that I was still the child who ran. I had to face him, not as a waitress begging for freedom, but as a key player in his dangerous world, the other half of the tether. I took a long shower, washing away the dust of 7 years and the terror of the last 2 days. I put on one of the new, simple black silk dresses he'd provided. It was stark, sophisticated, and felt like armor. I tied my hair back severely, exposing the clean line of my neck and, more importantly, the small, faded tattoo on my wrist. I wouldn't hide it anymore. It was my truth. By the time the clock hit 11:45 p.m., I was sitting in the largest armchair in the sitting area, the security file open on the table, a bottle of water untouched beside it. I had my plan. It was audacious, potentially suicidal, and completely unavoidable. The quiet turn of the key at 11:58 p.m. was the sharpest sound I had ever heard. Kain Blackwood walked in. He looked harder, darker. The exhaustion from the night before was still there, but overlaid with a new, ruthless determination. He was wearing a fresh suit, perfectly tailored, but his face was the face of a general who had just fought a brutal battle and was already planning the next war. He saw me immediately, dressed, ready, waiting. Not pacing, not crying, not pleading. "You're awake," he noted, his voice flat. He walked straight to the sofa he'd sat on the previous night, but he didn't sit. He remained standing, radiating power and impatience. "The meetings are concluded. The Thorn Alliance is shattered, but the fallout is contained. Now we deal with you." "I know," I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. I stood up and walked the few paces to the coffee table, planting my hands on its surface, forcing myself to look directly into his storm-colored eyes. Eli gave me the file. "I know about the Thorns. I know about Randall." His eyes narrowed slightly, a spark of dangerous surprise lighting them. "Eli is too soft. He should have waited." "No." He gave me the courtesy of being informed. I countered. "Which is more than you did. Your strategy, locking me away and hiding the truth, is failing, Kain. Randall is already sniffing around the edge of my identity. The others will follow soon. They know you canceled your wedding for a ghost. They will find the connection." I didn't wait for him to respond. I plunged straight into my demand. "You said I'm the shocking consequence of your weakness. I disagree. I am the necessary strength you suppressed for 7 years. The truth is, I cannot be a prisoner in your vault. It makes us both vulnerable. If I am hidden, I am a secret you have to protect, wasting your resources. If I am claimed, I become a wall you can stand behind." He crossed his arms, the gesture massive and intimidating. "Claimed? You're a waitress, Clara. How do I claim you in a way that makes the Thorns look away and the others hesitate? You make me more dangerous than I am hidden," I stated, pushing the file aside to reveal the empty space where the legal documents would go. My heart was hammering, but my gaze did not drop. "You canceled a wedding with a political powerhouse. Now you need a move that is equally dramatic, final, and legal. You need to make me the one person no one can touch without triggering the full wrath of the Blackwood Empire." I took a deep breath. "You said you did this because the bond is screaming that I am yours."
"Fine.
"Marry me, Kain." The silence that followed was so absolute it hurt my ears. Kain's expression, that cold, hard mask, cracked. His eyes went wide with a devastating mixture of disbelief, fury, and something rawly emotional that looked terrifyingly like hope. "You want me to what?" he finally snarled, the sound low and dangerous. "I canceled a wedding 5 minutes before the ceremony, and you want me to turn around and marry the woman who caused it? A woman who ran from me, who lied to me, and who is now the prime target for every enemy I have." "Yes," I insisted, my conviction strengthening with every beat of my racing heart. "Because it makes perfect, ruthless sense. The Thorns want to know why you chose a woman of no status over their daughter. You give them the reason. The bond is a contract. We are the tether in human form. You don't marry me for love. You marry me for power. For protection." I pointed to the tattoo on my wrist. "This isn't just a mark, Kain. It's the visual cue the others look for. If they see the mark, and I'm just your hidden mistress, they know they have a vulnerability to exploit. If they see the mark on the wrist of Mrs. Blackwood, the woman who controls a massive percentage of your assets, they know they're facing an unbreachable wall. It's the ultimate power play," I continued, pressing my advantage. "It's the narrative payoff for the world. You didn't leave your bride for a fling. You left her because the possession in me forces you to claim me, to fulfill an ancient, unbreakable contract that secures your bloodline and your organization. It shuts down the Thorns, who look foolish because you simply found a better alliance. It frightens the others, because a tether marriage means they face our combined strength. I leaned in, meeting his gaze with a fierce, unwavering intensity. We do it quiet, legally, immediately, and we issue a statement that the CEO Mafia Boss has claimed his necessary partner. It turns my cage into your throne. It forces me out of this suffocating darkness and into the spotlight, where I can finally monitor the threats and fight back. Kain walked slowly around the table, his eyes never leaving mine. He stopped right beside me. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, the latent, controlled power of him. He reached out, his long fingers curling around the back of my neck. His touch was possessive, demanding, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a deep, ancient satisfaction that the woman who had walked out on his life was now voluntarily walking back into his fire. An audacious bargain, Clara Hayes, he murmured, his breath hot against my ear. You think a ring and a piece of paper will grant you freedom within my world? No, I whispered, my voice thick with the moment. I think it grants me purpose within your world. I can't be weak anymore, Kain. I need to be your shield. And you need to stop punishing me for saving your life. His hand tightened just slightly on my neck. He pulled me closer until our bodies were barely separated by air. Fine, he said, his voice a low, gravelly vow that resonated with the sound of steel. I will marry you. We will do it immediately, tonight, with a notary and 2 of my most trusted lawyers. But let me be perfectly clear, Mrs. Blackwood. His eyes dropped to my lips. The marriage will be real. The protection will be absolute. But this is not a partnership built on trust. It is a contract built on possession. You stepped into my life, and now you are bound to it. Every moment, every day, you will be under my watch. And if you ever try to run again, I won't just lock you in a tower. I will chain you to me. He lowered his head and took my mouth in a kiss that was brutal, demanding, and utterly heartbreakingly familiar. It was the kiss of a man claiming his lost property, a man driven by years of loneliness and the sudden, terrifying realization that the only thing that made him whole was also the only thing that could destroy him. I clung to him, meeting his intensity, not as a victim, but as the co-conspirator in a magnificent, terrible plot. The waitress was gone. Mrs. Blackwood was here. The kiss ended as abruptly as it began, leaving me breathless and raw. Kain Blackwood stepped back, his face instantly reverting to that mask of cold, hard calculation. The fleeting moment of passionate ownership was over. The business of their devastating contract had begun. He didn't need to speak to his guards. A flicker of his eyes to the hidden door brought Eli and 2 serious, silent men, the lawyers, I presumed, into the suite. Eli looked from Kain's dangerously controlled demeanor to my flushed face and the exposed tattoo. He didn't look surprised by the quick escalation. Perhaps he knew his cousin well enough to anticipate this devastating move. The agreement, Kain, Eli stated immediately, holding up a thin, leather-bound folder that hadn't been in his hands moments ago. I prepared the immediate binding contract immediately after our conversation. It's ready for the notary. High speed, high security, completely non-public. Good, Kain affirmed, his voice a low command. He didn't look at the document. He looked at me. You understand this is irrevocable, Clara. This marriage is real, legal, and binding under both U.S. and Blackwood law. There are no escape clauses. I understand, I confirmed, walking over to the table and picking up the pen offered by the notary, a nervous, sweating man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I focused on the words of the contract, even though I knew the true terms were written in the invisible ink of our shared, terrible past. The document was short and brutally efficient. The transfer of significant assets to Clara Hayes Blackwood, the mutual pledge of protection, and the final, crushing line that explicitly named the soul tether as the underlying cause for the immediate union. It was a power play cloaked as a legal necessity. I sign my name, Clara Hayes, for the last time. Kain signed after me, his signature bold and forceful, leaving no doubt as to the finality of his claim. "Congratulations, Mrs. Blackwood," the notary muttered, looking sick with fear and relief. "You're done." Kain dismissed him without ceremony. The legal team vanished as quickly as they arrived. We were alone again, standing in the middle of the opulent suite, married by legal necessity and a terrifying, paranormal bond. "The next step," Kain said, walking toward the windows and ripping the thick curtains fully open, revealing the dark, private grounds of the estate. The action was symbolic. Our secret life was over. We issue the public statement. Eli has already prepared a draft. We need to frame the narrative payoff perfectly to handle the fallout from the thorns. Eli, who had remained, stepped forward and handed Kain a secure tablet. Kain scrolled, his jaw tight. "It will state that the wedding was canceled because of the immediate, unexpected activation of an ancient Blackwood family contract, one that mandates the head of the family be bound to an individual of the tether bloodline." Kain read aloud, his voice devoid of any warmth. "It will make you sound like a necessary asset, not a romantic partner." "That's exactly right," I agreed. "We shut down the romance angle. We make this about dynasty and power. It implies that your choice was inevitable, not emotional." Kain looked up, fixing me with a penetrating stare. "The public response will be explosive. You will be the most famous, most hated woman in the country by morning. The Thorns will use every channel to discredit you. They will dig up every single thing you did as a waitress and twist it into evidence of a long-term plot." "I know," I said, meeting his gaze. "But they won't find anything to prove I was plotting with you, because I wasn't. They'll find poverty, struggle, and desperation. That fits the narrative of a low-status person being swept up by a powerful contract. We lean into the truth of my low status. We make it part of the mystical necessity." He walked toward me, his hands settling on my shoulders, his grip firm, a warning and a promise. "From this moment on, you are no longer Clara Hayes. You are the required consort of the Blackwood organization. Your life is no longer your own. Every decision, every move will be scrutinized. Can you handle that, Clara? Can you handle the spotlight I'm about to put you under, knowing that the moment you slip, you endanger everything, including me?" "I can," I stated, the word coming out solid and unwavering. The fear was still there, but it was now channeled into a burning resolve. "I ran for 7 years because I was afraid of this. I won't run anymore. I will be your shield, Kain. But on one condition." His eyes narrowed further. "A condition? You are in no position to bargain, wife." "Yes, I am," I insisted. "I am the only one who can sense the others through the tether, dormant or not. I will not sit here in luxury while you fight a war. I need to be integrated into your security. I need access to the data on the others, their movements, their intentions. I can't protect you if I'm blind." This was the true beginning of the bargain, demanding agency. I had to transition from vulnerable/low status to a necessary, high-stakes figure in his world. Kain stared at me for a long, heavy moment. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially by someone he considered his prisoner. But there was a flicker of respect, a recognition of my core strength. "Done," he conceded finally. "You will be brought to my command center tomorrow morning. Marcus, the head of West Wing Security, will report directly to you. But I warn you, Clara, if you use this access to plan an escape, or if you expose yourself unnecessarily, I will pull you back here and seal this place off forever. Your freedom is contingent on your loyalty and your survival." He released my shoulders and stepped back. The change in his demeanor was instantaneous. The lover, the boy, the angry captor, all were gone. Only the Mafia Boss CEO remained, focused on the crisis. Eli, issue the statement. Simultaneously, leak the initial legal documents to 3 major rival newspapers. We make this unavoidable. Then, secure the command center for a full briefing at 0800 hours. The war for the Blackwood legacy has just begun, and the new Mrs. Blackwood is its central defense. He walked toward the inner door he had used before, his expression cold and unreadable. Where are you going? I asked, suddenly feeling the vast, cold space of the suite again. To my office, he said without turning back. I have a corporation to run and a dozen enemies to manage. I will not sleep in the same room as you, Clara.
Not yet.
We are married, but you are still a distraction, a mystery, and a danger. I will not risk the tether confusing my judgment. The door closed, leaving me utterly alone in the gilded cage that was now my matrimonial home. I walked to the nearest window and looked out at the vast, silent estate. The statement was going out. By morning, the world would know I was Kain Blackwood's wife, the result of a catastrophic, necessary contract. I had demanded the throne, and he had given me the battleground. I was no longer running from the past. I was fighting for the future, trapped in a cold, powerful marriage to the only man who could simultaneously destroy and complete me. The transition from the gilded prison to the Blackwood Command Center was stark. No longer was I surrounded by silent luxury. Now, it was buzzing, focused chaos. The command center was deep beneath the estate, a massive, reinforced bunker filled with glowing screens, maps, and the low, intense murmur of highly trained operatives. It smelled of coffee, cold metal, and barely contained stress. At 0800 hours, I was escorted down by Eli, who looked relieved I hadn't caused further disaster overnight. He led me past ranks of analysts and security specialists, all of whom stared at me, the woman who had broken Kain Blackwood's wedding, with a mix of suspicion and profound curiosity. Kain was waiting in a secluded war room, glass walls offering a view of the main floor. He was standing before a massive digital map of the U.S., a dark suit emphasizing his formidable presence. He didn't greet me. He simply nodded toward a chair. "This is your seat, Mrs. Blackwood," he said, his voice clipped and all business. "This is where you earn your bargain." The room was sparse, holding only the table, 3 chairs, and the large screen that currently displayed a detailed, threatening timeline. Marcus, the granite-faced head of West Wing Security, stood silently behind Kain. The public statement was a nuclear success, Eli reported, scrolling on a separate tablet. The market reacted with volatility, but the ancient covenant angle has effectively frozen the political press. Audrey Thorne is denying any knowledge of the tether, calling the marriage a farce, but her father, the senator, is oddly silent. He knows the political damage of appearing to interfere with a sacred family contract. He's regrouping, Kain predicted coldly, tapping the digital map. The Thorns won't fight us directly. They will finance the others. They will give Randall more resources to dig up the real dirt on Clara. He turned to me, his eyes sharp and unforgiving. "This is where you become a useful asset, not just a liability. The tether is supposed to give you a premonition, a sense, when the others are moving in force, or when they are focusing their dark energy. I need that edge. I need you to be my early warning system." "I told you, the bond is clamped," I reminded him, my hand instinctively going to my wrist. 7 years of suppression doesn't just vanish. I've only felt fear, panic, my own emotions. "Then we unclamped it," Kain stated, his voice absolute. He gave a sharp look to Marcus. Marcus stepped forward and placed a small, polished obsidian disc on the table directly in front of me. "This is a focal stone, ma'am. It's attuned to the Blackwood resonance. If the tether is merely dormant, its proximity should force a brief, localized activation of the sympathetic link." I stared at the disc. I knew about the focal stones. They were mentioned in the files Eli gave me, ancient tools used to amplify and control paranormal energies. Using one felt like inviting the very danger I had spent my life trying to avoid. "Is that safe?" I asked, my voice tight. Kain leaned his hands on the table, leaning in close. "Safe?
No.
It's war, Clara. But if we can predict their attack by even an hour, we save hundreds of lives in this organization. You made a bargain for purpose. Now fulfill it." I looked at the stone, then at Kain's demanding eyes. He needed me. He was risking his organization on my unstable, untrained ability. I had to face the curse to protect the man I loved. I reached out and placed my hand flat on the table, letting my wrist, the tattoo exposed, rest inches from the black stone. The moment I made contact, a violent jolt of raw energy shot through my arm. It wasn't just cold, it was wrong, a deep, unsettling vibration that hummed in my core. The stone began to glow faintly, absorbing the light from the screens. I gasped, gripping the table edge, focusing on maintaining my composure. The glass wall of the war room suddenly flickered, the edges shimmering slightly. "What is it?" Kain demanded instantly, his hand reaching out across the table toward me. "A presence," I whispered, the word thick in my throat. "It's not close. It's distant but strong. Not just one person. A gathering. They're focusing energy. A lot of dark energy. They're preparing something massive. A meeting? A summit?" Eli questioned, his face pale. I shook my head, my eyes squeezed shut against the sudden, overwhelming pressure in my skull.
No.
It's too coordinated. It feels like a pull, like a powerful magnet is dragging resources toward a central point. It's a preparation for a major ritual. Kain's hand slammed down on the table, not in anger, but in sharp decision. The others don't summon for small skirmishes. They are going for a large-scale strike. But where? I pulled my hand back from the stone, the sudden separation leaving me dizzy and shaking. The disc immediately went dull. "The tether is awake," I reported, rubbing my wrist. "It's screaming now, but the location is shielded. I need a focus. Something tangible to link with a target." Just then, one of the operatives on the main floor shouted, "Sir, incoming emergency signal from the East Coast surveillance team. They've intercepted a clean sweep comms blackout. All contact lost near the old Blackwood Manor, upstate New York." Kain's eyes snapped to the digital map. The old manor. It was a secure, heavily guarded location used to store priceless, ancient Blackwood artifacts related to the tether and the possession. "That's the target," Kain confirmed, his voice steel. "They're not after me. They're after the power source. They want to amplify their ritual with our artifacts. They want to weaponize the ancient knowledge." He turned to me, the fear now fully replaced by lethal focus. "Clara, use the stone. Focus on the manor. Tell me what they are planning. Use the tether. Feel the pull." I hesitated for only a second. This was it. The ultimate test of the bargain. I placed both hands on the black obsidian stone, closing my eyes and forcing myself to surrender to the terrifying, magnetic connection. I focused not on the pain, but on the place, the old manor, the target of the enemy. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of dark, violent energy. I could sense the other's presence, cold, hungry, and dangerously powerful. I felt the pull now, not just a distant awareness, but a specific, devastating intention. "It's a sacrifice," I gasped, the words tumbling out. "They're not just taking the artifacts. They need a vessel, a possession host, to channel the artifact's power. They're trying to lure a tether bloodline individual to the manor. It's a trap, Kain. They know you have me." Kain exchanged a grim look with Eli and Marcus. "They're not trying to lure you," Kain corrected, his voice strangely flat. "They know I would never risk you. They are trying to lure Elias." Eli's face went white. He, too, possessed a minor, latent tether bloodline, a strong enough anchor to serve as the necessary vessel for their ritual. "Eli, you are not to leave this compound," Kain commanded instantly. "Marcus, double all internal patrols. Seal the manor. Prepare for a scorched earth defense. We lose the artifacts rather than risk an activation." "It's too late, Kain," Eli whispered, looking terrified but resolute. I felt the pull, too. Just before the communications went out, I dismissed it as stress, but I think I've already been targeted. If I stay here, I put everyone in this bunker at risk. The others know I'm the easier target. He looked at Kain, the cousin's fierce loyalty overriding his fear. "I need to go to the manor. I need to draw them out. It's the only way to protect Clara, to protect the true tether." Kain stared at his cousin. The sheer impossibility of the choice, saving his cousin or protecting his wife, a devastating weight. I looked at the terrified man, then at my powerful, heartbroken husband. I had made a bargain for purpose. No, I said, pulling my hands off the stone, the tension snapping. Eli doesn't go. I go. Both Kain and Eli stared at me in stunned silence. It's my power they want, I stated, standing up, my knees trembling but my resolve steel hard. I'm the possession host they need. The full one. Eli is a secondary prize. If I show up, I become the prime target. It draws the main force of the ritual away from Eli and the artifacts. And you can prepare for a surgical strike to extract me. Kain was furious. Absolutely not. You are the only thing that matters. I will not risk the tether. You will, I argued, walking around the table until I was directly in front of him, looking up at the cold fury in his eyes. Because this is the only way to save Eli, the artifacts, and this organization. You made me your wife for protection, Kain. This is the shocking consequence of your decision. I placed my hand on his chest, right over his beating heart. You trusted the bond. Trusted now. I can survive the ritual because I have been suppressing this power for 7 years. I know how to control the drain. I am the bait, but I am also the only one who can walk away from that ritual intact. Now, give me the resources, give me Marcus, and get me to that manor. Let the Mafia Boss CEO's wife draw the enemy out. Kain looked down at me, his eyes burning with a terrible, consuming devotion. The struggle between the general and the husband was agonizingly clear on his face. Finally, he gave a slow, devastating nod.
Fine.
You go, he ground out, his voice thick with a mixture of terror and fierce pride. But you wear a locator bead wired to my artery. I will know if your heart stops. And if you are compromised, I will deploy a strike team that will level that manor and everything in it, including the artifacts. We lose everything to save you. Do you understand that, Mrs. Blackwood? I understand, I replied, meeting his intense gaze. Marcus, Kain commanded, his voice a return to absolute ice. Prepare the extraction. You are her only escort. Get her what she needs. We move in 90 minutes. I had come to this estate a frightened waitress. Now, I was the mafia boss's wife, preparing to walk into a paranormal trap to save his family. My gilded prison had become the staging ground for a final, terrifying confrontation.